In 2012, a millionaire called 911 claiming his wife had been kidnapped. But what police found in his abandoned Lexus would expose one of the most chilling murders in California history. October 10, 2012, Newport Beach, California, one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. Behind the gates of a luxury home, 45-year-old QC Chadwick was about to discover that her fairy tale marriage was actually a nightmare she'd never wake up from. Peter Chadwick seemed to have it all. The British-born businessman had built a real estate empire worth millions. He lived in a sprawling mansion, drove luxury cars, and rubbed shoulders with California's elite. But beneath the designer suits and charming accent lurked something far darker. On that October morning, Peter called 911 with a frantic story.
911 emergency, this is Crystal.
Yeah, my wife's dead.
He claimed that a handyman he had invited over to discuss work had suddenly turned violent. According to Peter, this man had murdered QC in their home and then forced Peter at knife point to help drive the body away in the back of his Lexus SUV. He had scratches on his neck and blood on his hands. A man who claimed he'd been jumped, overpowered, and made a prisoner in his own car. But investigators weren't buying it. Within hours, they found Peter's Lexus abandoned in a San Diego parking lot, 60 miles south, near the Mexican border. And inside the back, a scene that told a completely different story than the one Peter was selling. The evidence in that SUV would expose one of the most calculated murders in Orange County history. Blood. Lots of it. QC's blood saturated the cargo area. The vehicle reeked of cleaning chemicals. Someone had desperately tried to scrub away evidence. But you can't erase murder that easily. Forensic analysts found blood spatter patterns consistent with a violent struggle. They found QC's DNA, and they found something else. Evidence that a body had been transported in that vehicle. Detectives did what they do best. They started digging into the Chadwick's picture-perfect life. What they discovered was a marriage in free fall. Peter and QC's relationship had been crumbling for years. Financial problems were mounting. Peter's real estate business was struggling in the post-2008 market crash. The mansion, the cars, the lifestyle, it was all built on a foundation of debt. QC wanted out. She'd been talking to divorce attorneys, and in California, a state with community property laws, that divorce would have cost Peter dearly. Peter Chadwick faced losing everything: his money, his lifestyle, his reputation. So he decided to eliminate the problem. Investigators reconstructed what really happened that morning. There were no kidnappers, no random attack. Peter had murdered his wife inside their own master bathroom, then loaded her body into the Lexus and driven toward the border. He'd intended to dump her body somewhere it would never be found, stage a kidnapping, and play the grieving husband. During a high-stakes interrogation, the cracks in Peter's story became chasms. Eventually, he broke. He led police to a remote dumpster in San Diego. 1 week after she vanished, QC's body was found. She'd been strangled. The medical examiner determined she'd suffered significant trauma before death. This wasn't a crime of passion or a momentary loss of control. This was deliberate, calculated, cold-blooded murder. Peter Chadwick was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. The evidence was overwhelming: the blood in his vehicle, the location of the body, his implausible story. But Peter had one advantage: money. He posted his $1 million bail and was released while awaiting trial. And then Peter Chadwick did what wealthy criminals often do: he ran. In January 2015, Peter Chadwick vanished. He was supposed to check in with authorities. He didn't. An arrest warrant was issued. The FBI launched a manhunt, and Peter Chadwick became a ghost. For 4 years, one of America's most wanted fugitives disappeared into thin air. The FBI believed he'd fled to Mexico initially, possibly crossing the border with help from accomplices. Investigators thought he might have made his way to Europe, possibly back to his native Britain. But there was nothing. No confirmed sightings, no financial transactions, no trace. QC's family was left in agonizing limbo. Their daughter was dead, murdered by her own husband, and her killer was free somewhere in the world, living under a new identity. But the U.S. Marshals Service doesn't give up easily. The Marshals put Chadwick on their 15 most wanted list. They coordinated with international law enforcement agencies. They chased down every lead, no matter how thin, and they kept the pressure on. In August 2019, 4 years after he vanished, Peter Chadwick made one critical mistake. A tip came in from Mexico. Someone matching Chadwick's description was living in a town near Puebla, about 2 hours from Mexico City. He was using the name Quinn, keeping a low profile at local sports bars, but neighbors had noticed something off about him. U.S. Marshals coordinated with Mexican authorities. They surveilled the location, and on August 5, 2019, they moved in. Peter Chadwick was arrested trying to leave his apartment. He'd been living under his alias for years, but the game was over. When investigators searched Chadwick's Mexican hideout, they found detailed journals. Peter had been documenting his life on the run, and what they read was chilling. He'd meticulously planned his escape. He'd researched countries with no extradition treaties. He'd explored plastic surgery options to change his appearance. He'd studied how to create false identities. This wasn't a desperate man making panicked decisions. This was a calculated predator who'd been planning his escape route even before killing his wife. Evidence suggested Peter had been preparing to flee long before QC's murder. He'd moved money offshore. He'd gathered documents. He'd created contingency plans. The murder wasn't a sudden act. It was part of a larger strategy to eliminate his wife, avoid financial ruin, and disappear with whatever assets he could protect. Extradited back to California, Peter Chadwick finally faced justice, but he wasn't done trying to manipulate the system. For months, his defense attorneys fought the evidence, but the 4 years on the run were the ultimate proof of guilt. In February 2022, nearly a decade after QC's murder, Peter Chadwick faced the moment he'd been running from. Faced with a mountain of evidence, Peter Chadwick chose to end the charade. He entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder. The courtroom was heavy with emotion as QC's family, who'd waited nearly a decade for justice, finally saw him admit to the crime. By pleading guilty, he spared his sons from the trauma of a trial, but he couldn't escape the consequences. Peter Chadwick was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. At 57 years old, the man who once lived in a Newport Beach mansion was led away to spend the rest of his life in a California state prison. But the Chadwick case raises disturbing questions about wealth, privilege, and justice in America. How does a murder suspect out on $1 million bail simply vanish? Where did Peter get the resources to hide internationally for 4 years? The case exposed serious flaws in the bail system. Here was a man with clear means and motive to flee, yet he was granted bail and placed on an honor system. Wealthy defendants have advantages. They can afford the best attorneys and astronomical bail, and if they choose to run, they have the resources to disappear in ways that others never could. QC Chadwick never got to see her killer face justice. She was murdered by the man she trusted, the father of her children, motivated by the oldest reason in the book, money. The Chadwick case is a stark reminder that privilege can delay justice, but it can't prevent it forever. Eventually, the truth catches up. Eventually, even millionaires who think they're above the law find themselves sitting in a cell, realizing that no amount of money can buy back a life or erase the ghost of the truth.